Protection is often seen as something that's quite unpleasant to talk about. It's not in a dramatic way, it's just uncomfortable. No one wants to think about when stuff goes wrong. No one wants to think about that they'll get sick someday or they'll die. And it's something you tell yourself you'll deal with when things slow down, when you have more time, or when it feels more relevant. That is why it's often pushed back. It's not because people don't care or don't understand it, simply that it doesn't feel urgent at the time. And when life is busy, urgency dictates what gets attention. The problem is, this way of thinking quietly undermines your progress, and its protection isn't about the fear or expecting something to go wrong. It's about what happens to progress when life doesn't go exactly as planned. Most people don't notice this because progress feels solid. You build momentum, your income improves, you're paying off your mortgage, life becomes more comfortable, decisions feel manageable, and it starts to feel great, and it feels like the system works until something goes wrong. It doesn't even have to be a catastrophe or something or everything falling apart. It's just an interruption, a period where things don't work the way they normally do. When your income changes, your focus changes, your capacity changes, and this is usually when people realize how fragile their progress actually is. And that's where protection truly lies. It's not in the fear or pessimism, it's in preserving what's already been built. Once you see it that way, it stops becoming a negative conversation. It becomes a question of continuity, and that's what I want to unpack today. I think we need to look at it differently. So I want you to rethink how you hear the word protection. And most people hear it and immediately associate it with negativity, as if it means expecting something to go wrong or planning for failure. That reaction is understandable, but it is also misleading. Protection isn't about assuming the worst, it's about recognizing that life is unpredictable and that progress is more fragile than it feels. If you spent years building momentum in your career, your income, and your lifestyle, protection is simply the one thing that stops a single interruption from undoing all of that effort. You don't need a disaster for progress to unravel. Most of the damage doesn't come from everything collapsing at once, it comes from gentle disruption, income changing, focus shifting, capacity reducing for a period of time. And when protection is framed as something negative, it gets delayed. When it's framed as preservation, it becomes obvious. This is the reframe we need to focus on, because preservation is just respect for the time, energy, and work that's already been invested into your life. That's not a negative mindset, that's a professional one. And once that clicks, the rest of the conversation changes. Protection isn't ignored because most people don't understand it. Most people do understand it, at least at an intellectual level. They know it's sensible. They know it's important. They know it's something they should probably sort out. That's not the issue. The problem lies in its probability. Most of the time, nothing happens and you're not using it. When nothing occurs, it quietly reinforces the notion that protection isn't truly necessary. People look back and think, I've been fine so far. This is true. And that the human brain is adept at using past calm to justify future delay. When life is busy, attention is allocated simply by urgency, not importance. The loudest problems get dealt with first. Your deadlines, decisions with immediate consequences, not protection. Protection doesn't shout. There's no deadline, there's no visible problem, and no short-term improvement when it's implemented. Therefore, it loses repeatedly, week after week, year after year. And this is where it becomes counterintuitive. The people most likely to delay protection are often those doing well. They're competent, they're capable, and have solved problems before. They're accustomed to adapting. So their internal logic becomes, if something happens, I'll deal with it. And often they would. However, this logic hides the cost of that adaptation. Adapting requires energy, focus, emotional bandwidth, and sometimes financial resources that wouldn't have been necessary otherwise. Furthermore, these costs don't neatly appear on a spreadsheet. They manifest over time, such as slower progress, compromised decision making, stress at inconvenient times. None of these feel dramatic enough to prompt urgency in advance. However, they matter when they occur. Another quiet factor at play is that protection doesn't produce a visible win. You can see investment growth when you invest. You can see your career progression when you work hard, and your lifestyle upgrades with it. When done properly, protection produces nothing. Nothing happens. This makes it psychologically unsatisfying. People are wired to prioritize actions that create visible progress. Protection creates invisible stability rather than that. It's easier to deprioritize, even for intelligent and rational people. So protection gets delayed, not because it's unimportant, but because it competes badly for our attention. It demands time, demands decisions now in exchange for resilience later. And later always feels negotiable until it isn't. And this is why conversations about protection often feel awkward or forced. They're fighting your inner human psychology. And once you understand that you can stop framing the delay as carelessness. You see it for what it is. It's a predictable response to how people allocate attention under pressure. And that matters because it changes the whole topic when approached. There is a substantial amount of risk in avoiding protection altogether. And when people think about risk, they usually picture something catastrophic. And that's everything going wrong at once with your world collapsing around you. That's rarely how financial damage actually happens. Most damage doesn't come from things ending, it comes from things being interrupted. Life rarely blows everything up overnight. It interrupts it. And interruption's harder to plan for because it doesn't feel as dramatic and it doesn't announce itself. It just changes your pace, your direction, and the ability or your capacity to work the way you used to. Interruption doesn't need to be extreme or expensive either. It could be a period of illness. You could be off work for 3 months. It could be an accident that limits your capacity going forward. It could be a legal issue or unexpected responsibility. None of these are catastrophic in their own right, but they're big enough to change how decisions will get made in the future. Income might reduce and your focus might shift, and this might cause your plans to get postponed, and people underestimate how quickly momentum can unravel once continuity breaks. Progress compounds quietly, but so does the drag. Slower progress means you are missing opportunities. Decisions are getting pushed back. Plans that relied on consistency begin to fray, not because the plan was bad, but because it assumed that you would carry on how you used to. And that is where the real damage occurs. Interruption is dangerous because it doesn't stay contained. A financial interruption quickly becomes a decision-making one. Energy needs to be redirected towards coping with the problem, and time is pulled into managing that situation. Your margin disappears at exactly the moment where clarity is needed the most, and that is where years are lost. Not because everything fell apart, but because progress never quite restarts in the same way. People may recover and they may adapt, but they may move on, but often on a lower trajectory than before. And that gap can be minute. It doesn't feel like failure, but it will compound. And there are protection policies designed to deal with catastrophic events, such as serious illness, permanent incapacity, or death. These events matter and they should be addressed, but protection doesn't exist only for the worst case scenario. It exists to stop disruption, large or small, from permanently changing the direction of progress. And that's the distinction that most people miss. Protection isn't about assuming the worst. It's about recognizing how fragile momentum really is, and how little events or big events can really impact your progress, and how to protect your momentum going forward. So the practical question becomes, what should actually be in place? Broadly speaking, protection sits across a few key areas, and these are policies designed to deal with catastrophic events, things like serious illness or death, where the financial impact is immediate and permanent. But there are also policies designed to deal with interruption, where income continues, but capacity is reduced, delayed, or inconsistent for a period of time. This can be if you're ill, but each exists for a different reason. Each solves a different problem. In this series, I'll go into a detail on critical illness, life cover, income protection, and explain what they're actually used for, when they matter, and just as importantly, when they don't. But the principle underneath all of them is the same. It's better to have something in place and never need it than to need it and realize it's too late that it isn't there. Not because you expect the worst, but because you value the momentum you've built. You value the continuity you have because you respect the progress you've established. And if you want to understand how this applies to your own situation, not in theory, but practically, that's a conversation I have with people regularly. There's no pressure, there's no obligation. It's just a structured discussion about how protection fits into your bigger picture and whether it's even relevant. If that's useful, you can reach out. I'll put my website in my bio, and in the next few videos, I'll break down each of these areas properly. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe.